Good morning, everybody. We'll be just getting started in a minute. Okay, good morning, everybody. Just while a few more people are joining us, I want to welcome you all this morning to our first webinar of the year. I can't believe it's come around so quickly. And we're going to be talking today around people, processes and partnerships, the secrets to successful projects. Now, I'm not guaranteeing we're going to tell you all of the answers today, but just covering off some of the sort of the points that we see. So just to cover off some of the more boring elements, the etiquette side of things. So to say that the session is being recorded and will be available on demand after the event. There is a Q&A box that you will see, and this is for any questions that you have for Nuna or myself. And we really want this to be as interactive as possible, you know, being that it is online. So please do put in your questions. We will be covering off as many of them as we can. We'll say please put them in throughout the session rather than just waiting to the end. We've also got a chat box, and that's for any more technical support questions or any sort of general questions around the facilitation of the event. And my colleague Rebecca is in the background keeping an eye on all of that. And then also just to say to check that your microphone is on mute. So I'm Joyce Harman, and I'm one of the consultants at Heart Square, and I'm absolutely delighted to have Nuna joining us today from IOM3. Nuna, if I could ask you to quickly introduce yourself.
Hello, I'm Nuna Staniaszek. I'm Director of Communications at the Institute of Materials, Minerals and Mining. And we worked with Heart Square to deliver a major digital transformation project, which launched just over a year ago.
Perfect, thanks Nuna. Looking forward to finding out a bit more. This I really just want to put up for those of you that are not aware of Heart Square. I should also say, for those of you who are familiar with us, this is our new brand and our new logo, which we're all very proud of, and very much around showing the focus that is with working with organisations like yourself, amazing organisations, to help achieve remarkable things. And some of the key points really are just to say that we work only in the non-for-profit sector, and that we are independent of any technologies or technology partners. So before we go into the content and start talking to Nuna, I wanted to run just a quick poll. So if you can bear with me while I get this to work. And this is really just to give us an idea of who's with us today, what sort of stage that you're at. So the question is around what are the key challenges that you're facing either on a current project or you've faced in the past when running a technology project. So I'll just give this a few more seconds to see the two big ones that are winning at the moment are definitely resources to deliver the project and ability to focus on the day job. So let me just let that run for another few seconds. Okay. And if I end the polling, and let me share the results with you all. So I think that is quite interesting. It's I suppose there's nothing surprising. I would say definitely resourcing, that we find that a lot. You know, that 79% of you guys are saying that. Conflicting priorities, yes, absolutely. You know, that there's no such thing as one project and nothing else to do. Interesting around the lack of senior management buy-in. I know that's something that we're going to cover off at Nuna, that I know at IOM3 they had a really good approach about senior management buy-in and pushing the project forward. And then interesting on resistance to the project or change. I always think that's a very interesting point. So thank you very much for that. Let me stop sharing. So then if I just move on, so yeah, as I say, from the poll, that there's some of them are already in here because there are common challenges that we see on projects. So you know, very much chiming with that, I think the big thing around conflicting priorities. Very often for an organization might be running more than one project at a time. But it's not even just on the running project, it's, you know, your day job, it's running the business, doing all of the things that you need to do. where do you prioritize your time? How do you prioritize your time? What is the message coming from senior management around how you need to break up your time? So conflicting priorities is a really big one. The resourcing, for those of you who have attended any other sort of sessions or webinars with myself, will know that resourcing is one that I will always talk about, because it is one of the biggest challenges that we see. People often underestimate the resources that are needed on a project, from things like your subject matter expert, your project manager, your project sponsor, covering off data. So resourcing is always a huge challenge, and making sure that you have identified the correct resources, that they have the time to do it, but also that they've got the skills as well. And then, it's, as with all projects, it's not just about go live and then the project's finished. What happens when you move back into business as usual, and what resources you're going to need, and how are you going to manage that? So there are some of the challenges that we see, which definitely resonate on the poll. I just want to talk about this one briefly. We carry out a research study regularly around why do technology projects succeed or fail. This was very much posed in one of the questions of, why had projects failed? And without going through all of them in great detail, but as you can see that, the people and the processes, they're two very big chunky parts of this. And really on the people side, that was down to the respondents saying there was lack of buy-in for the project. There was lack of internal management, poor user adoption, which came down to, say, when we're working around user acceptance testing, how that was done, how that was approached, and also just lack of time always comes up. On the processes side, one of the big things around this was very much having a poor definition of what the requirements you needed were. Because if it's not clear what it is that you're trying to deliver by a new system, that is going to cause problems. Also bringing inefficient processes into any new systems as well. The strategy one is kind of very obvious, really. If it's not clear what it is you're trying to achieve, or what the benefits are you're trying to get from doing this piece of work, then it's much harder to bring people along. And a lot of people are often surprised that the technology element is such a small part, but this is really, in essence, with enough money and enough resources, technology can be made to do anything. But very often the reason the technology was the issue was more down to there was missing functionality, or the systems had become highly bespoke, highly customized. So just to break this down into sort of the three key areas we're looking at today. So on the people side, we talk, a lot about change management. So, what do we mean by change management? It's one of those terms that gets bandied about a lot. It's a set of processes, it's tools and techniques that's about managing the people side of change to achieve business outcomes. And I suppose for me, the two key elements are the people and the business outcomes. They're the two key things that you have to keep in mind throughout any project. And these are not in any particular order. It's really looking at what we recommend in projects, and from the number of projects that we run, that making sure that the senior management buy-in, it's vital. It's the crux to any successful project. But having proper communications and conversations with your team, with your staff around timelines. So being realistic. For example, if you run a big annual event, or around renewals time or Christmas, that shouldn't be the date you pick for go live. So having conversations with your staff, with your key stakeholders, to understand what are the key areas that are no-goes for either testing or go live or things like that. Having that clear, defined set of benefits or the outcomes that you want for the project, that people understand what they are, so therefore they understand why you're doing this project and why it's going to make their life easier, so they're bought in through the project. Very much looking at that, your business as usual while you're doing the project. Your job still needs to be delivered. So having conversations with the team around, is there going to be backfill? How is this going to be managed? And really making sure that throughout the whole project, you're constantly reviewing how the project is going. Is there any issues coming up? Is there any blockers? What can we do around that? On the processes side, some considerations that we see and sort of say to people is, at the start, if possible, and then when I'm saying at the start, is this would be before you bring in your technology partner, if at all possible, carry out a business process review. And the reason for this is it's about you don't want to bring bad processes into a new system, but it's also about identifying where there might be some inefficiencies in what you're currently doing, you know, understanding what opportunities there are for either more automation. But it's, you know, obviously the technology partners, when they go through discovery, they're going to be looking at this, but it's very good if you can do this piece of work yourself first, but, you know, it's not always possible. On the governance side and the documentation, you know, it's very important that, you know, for as me as a project manager head on, that, you know, your documentation is the key. So right at the start, getting your project plan together and signed off, putting together your project initiation document, or your PID, as it's often referred to, putting together your risk register, or RAID log, as it's often referred to, your budget tracker, all of the different documentation that you need, agreeing how often is the board going to meet, what papers are going to be needed for the board. So right at the start of the project, you've got that solid foundation so that everybody knows what the plan is, how it's going to work, and how you're going to approach it. On the communications plan side of things, that really comes back to the change management piece as well. So it shouldn't be a case of you suddenly are communicating with staff sort of just at the start of discovery that this project is happening, is that people are aware right from the start why you're doing it, what their level of involvement is going to be. And then throughout the whole project, you're giving people that might not be as involved in the project just regular updates of what's happening. You know, keeping people aware of what's happening, it really makes people more excited about the project if they know what's going on, and they can, or, you know, believing in the shared benefits, the shared outcomes that are going to come. And then just really, really quick point on your project plan. The technology partners will have their own project plan, but it's very important that you also have yours. Very often people will say, well, they have a plan, we don't need one. You do. It's very important because their focus is on the delivery and not some of the nuances that you will need to consider. So it's very important that you have those two plans working in parallel. And then again, you know, identifying the teams and the people that are required, making sure that they have, you know, the skills, the time, and, you know, the capacity, you know, to work on the project. And then finally, moving on to partnerships. So when I'm saying partnerships, what do I really mean? We're talking about the technology partner. So as is with everything, you know, in life, you know, you want a good and a close relationship, you know, which takes time and effort, you know, as in everything in your normal life, you know, the more effort you put into a relationship, hopefully the better it will be. So having honest and frequent communication with your technology partner, not being afraid to ask questions. If there's something you're not clear about, you know, ask. Don't let there be any misunderstanding, because that's when the relationships can break down. The point on understanding the importance of discovery and sign off. Sometimes some organizations think that, well, we did our requirements gathering, we've gone out to market, we've had our quote, and that we've picked a partner and they're now working through. But the discovery is the first piece of work that the technology partner is going to do. And that is where they're going to get into the nitty gritty of understanding you in great detail. And then they're going to put together the final scope. And that is going to be what they're going to deliver for you. So being very clear when you're signing off that final scope to make sure there's nothing missing, that there's nothing that you're not sure of, so that because that's what you're going to get at the end of it, that's what you're going to pay for. So being very clear on that, and again, ask questions. And then with sort of looking at signing off the scope as well, focusing on, you know, not just that what the technology is going to deliver, but in the contract as well, thinking about, you know, what service level agreements do you need, what support do you need, so that they're very much focused on what your business needs are, how you need to work as an organization post go live. So making sure that you ask all of those questions early on, and that you understand how that's reflected in the contract. So now, enough from me. I'm going to bring Nuna in. So Nuna, as you know, we've a number of questions for you now, and I see that there's some starting to come in already. So could you just give us a quick overview of IOM3, that, you know, the services you provide to members and to other stakeholders?
So IOM3, we're the Institute of Materials, Minerals and Mining, and we're the professional membership body for that sector. We're one of the medium-sized professional engineering institutions in terms of our members. We've got about 15,000 members, mainly in the UK, but we do have overseas membership as well, about 20%. And our origins go back to 1869, the Iron and Steel Institute. And since that time, we've been created as a result of over 30 mergers with different organizations, incorporating all aspects of materials, metals, mining, and minerals. So our organization actually has a very broad range of disciplines. Our aim as an organization is to promote and develop all aspects of the materials cycle. So from exploration and extraction through processing, applications, product recycling, repurposing, reuse. And our aim at the moment, our kind of message is to help our members become heroes of the transition to a low carbon economy. So we support our members working in research and industry across all of these disciplines. We're also a professional registration body. So we're quite unusual in that we offer chartered engineer, chartered scientist, and chartered environmentalist because of this broad scope of our activities. So we're registered for all of those qualifications with the relevant councils, the registration bodies. And we support members at different stages of their career, all the way from students to senior industry executives. So we're kind of very broad in discipline and also in the kind of career stages of the people we support. So to do that, we offer conferences and events, training courses. We have a range of publications and journals. We provide services for businesses and organizations who want to tap into our activities. We accredit degree courses in materials and learning programs. And we have awards, grants, competitions, those kind of activities, particularly for younger members. We also do policy work and respond to government consultations. Within the Institute, because of this broad range of disciplines, we are basically structured around a number of different communities dealing with different specializations. So at the moment, we've got about 40 different technical groups, which we're reviewing and trying to bring down to just over 20. And then we also have member networks, such as a Women in Materials, Minerals and Mining network. And we have local societies that are affiliated to us. So we have quite a broad, quite a large number of volunteers who actually are involved in our activities. They're also on governance boards and the committees. So managing volunteers and making facilities available to volunteers to help them in the running of our activities is very important. And our staff team is just over 40. And we're based in 2 offices, one in central London and one in Grantham.
Thanks, Nuala. And I love that, you know, there's such a broad range of things that you do. And as I say, you're a staff of 40. You would think that you're a staff of hundreds from the, you know, the array of things that you do. So talking about the project, could you describe sort of some of the goals of, you know, the CRM and the website project? Because obviously, you know, you were looking at both. And, you know, what was the problems that you were trying to solve, you know, or what, you know, what were the goals of the project?
So we had a legacy CRM system that we'd inherited through one of our mergers, and that was getting on for about 20 years old. And we knew at some point that we would have to move to a new system. But it was one of those things that I suppose we knew it was going to be such a huge project to do that. We were busy with other things and we did keep putting it off until the time was right. We didn't have a great relationship with our existing supplier. They were trying to move us onto one of their other systems, but we weren't keen to do that. We had other systems as well that we were using for, so that the CRM was used for membership mainly. We had another system for events and awards, another system for sales, and then a separate email marketing system. So we had a number of these systems that weren't integrated, and that meant we had a lot of manual downloading of data, uploading of data, just really making it awkward for people to use information and data in their day-to-day activities. And of course, that meant we didn't really have a 360-degree picture of our members and our contacts, because the information was in 3 or 4 different systems. So that was really one of the main goals, was to try and get a more integrated system. We had a website that was integrated to some extent with the CRM, but it was quite limited in what we could achieve. And also, we knew that the website platform was going to be unsupported within a couple of years. So we knew that we were kind of due for a website refresh as well. And we also had a pretty poor relationship with our website developer. So all of those indicators, I think it all came together. And we knew we had to bite the bullet, really, because the CRM system was no longer going to be supported. So we had no option but to tackle the project to move to a new CRM and a website associated with it. So our main goals with what we were looking to do was to give members a better online experience with a single login, so that they had one system that they could go in and do everything they wanted to do. Reduce all of those manual processes, obviously, and make things more efficient, and try and break down some of the silos of activity, because we had very much people working within their own systems, within their own areas. So that was an aim, really, to try and get more sort of cross organization activity and cross-selling opportunities for that kind of thing, and have a system that everybody felt was theirs, not a CRM that was thought to be very much the domain of the membership team, rather than something that was useful for everyone. We wanted to try and give users of the website more customized content, and for them to become more engaged with what was on the website. So that was really one of the main aims on the website of things. And from the management point of view, we really wanted to be able to improve reporting and access to data, to help us make management decisions that was based on data we could trust. And also, we wanted to find a partner with whom we could have a good and productive long-term relationship, because that really is absolutely vital. And our experience from previous digital partners had not been great. So, you know, we really wanted to find someone that was a good fit, that, you know, matched our kind of values and what we wanted to do, and with whom we could develop going forward, not just for the term of the project.
Perfect. And I think it's also interesting, you know, and all absolutely really good solid reasons for, you know, for doing the CRM and the website. But I know for some people, the thought of doing a CRM and a website project at the same time probably horrifies quite a few people, because of, you know, of the amount of work involved. But you know, I know we'll talk about that a bit more. But you know, obviously you did it very successfully, but I imagine it puts an extra burden sort of on the team as well, sort of looking at doing both projects. So just sort of moving on to talk about the sort of the partner selection stage, because, you know, that's sort of a key element at the start of the project. You know, so were there any points or stages in that process that you think would be important for people to consider, for people to think about at that partner selection stage?
So I think I agree with what you said. You know, partner selection was really critical, and we were very aware of that, finding somebody with a good fit. So, as I said, it was a daunting process to know that, you know, we had to select somebody. And I'd been to quite a few webinars and talked to people who'd been through similar projects before we embarked on this whole process. And obviously there were quite a lot of horror stories there, and, you know, we knew we wanted to avoid things going wrong. And I think partner selection, you know, where do you begin? Most people, digital partners, if you do approach them, of course they're going to mostly say that they can fulfill your requirements. So I was really happy, Joyce, when we met up, and I think you called me at the right time. The fact that you were available to help an organisation like us to kind of handhold us through that partner selection. So I think that was really key for us. We were wondering how we would do it, and I think the service you provided was great because it was a very thorough and structured process. Obviously, you had done it before with other clients, so we had the benefit of your knowledge and expertise in taking us through that, and I think that worked really well. We also, before we set out on that, we did sit down and with our senior management team and really think about what we wanted to achieve through the project, what our organizational aims were. So I think that's really important to make sure that the organization really agrees what it is you're trying to achieve, and look at those kind of longer term aims, so that you've got that already at the start when you're trying to find a supplier who will take you on that journey. It was still a very intense process, and I think we had all of our senior team involved in that. We also had some of our trustees, because obviously the expenditure we needed to make on this project was going to be quite significant. Our trustees gave their approval, but we had representatives of the trustees, a small group of 3, I think, who came in at key parts of that process of the supplier selection and were happy with how it was carried out and what the outcome was and the partner that was chosen. So, we had kind of buy-in from everybody, and it wasn't supplier selection wasn't left to just the people who were involved on the digital side. That was already a whole organization decision. And I think, having had experience of some difficult projects going wrong in the past with website delivery, not CRM, I was really keen that it wasn't it was a decision that was made collectively, and that there was buy-in from everybody in making that critical decision. So I think that's very important.
And actually, Nuno, just because a question that's coming, I think that fits in nicely with that, and it was about involving the board. So the question was, how involved with the board where after the initial decision to start the project, and would you change this level if you did the project again? I just thought it interesting because you were talking about the board of trustees. Yeah, so would you change anything about their level of involvement if you were doing the project again?
No, I think it was good to have somebody who was appointed to kind of keep an eye on what was going on, both initially, and in fact we had the trustees, the digital transformation working group, just a small working group of 3 who were kept up to date as the project progressed. And I think they were sort of there to make sure that things were happening on time, on budget, and that there weren't any problems. And it was quite reassuring in a way to have that involvement from the top. I think it also showed a level of their commitment to the project, and meant that there was that kind of engagement and communication between what was going on, the senior management team and the trustees. So I think that was a good move. I was hesitant at the beginning because you never know. I suppose it depends a lot on who you get from the trustees and their kind of level of wanting to be involved. But we had a very good team from there, and I think that was really helpful.
Yeah, no, definitely. Yeah, I completely agree. Then moving on to look at, as we know, we've sort of already said, delivering technology projects, it takes up an awful lot of staff time. Let's be realistic. So how did you make the project delivery sort of a priority? The team's already very busy, they have the day jobs. How did you approach that?
So I think we were very lucky because I think people were really ready to move on. They were very frustrated with the systems. So, there was already a big appetite for moving forward and having something that would make their lives easier. So we had a lot of buy-in from the team to start with, we had a very clear directive from the senior team and the trustees that this was a priority. And I think people were aware that it was a business critical project for us. People were aware that they were to give this priority. I think the message was loud and clear from our CEO, who basically said, this project is your priority. If you've got issues, please talk to your line manager, and we'll try and put something in place to make sure you can devote the time. And we did have some, support from other teams for people when they needed time to take part in the project. Having said that, of course, it was hard. People did devote an awful lot of time to it. But there's kind of no other way around it. But I think that having that clear directive and knowing where people were heading kind of helped to give it priority. And we also had a project manager in place who I think really helped to kind of keep those teams on board and encourage them, and give it a more structured process that we knew where we were and what we needed to do, and that helped as well.
Yeah, perfect. As we sort of said, sort of already looking at, a lot of where a lot of projects kind of go wrong is that people very much just focus on the tech, and they forget about that change management side, or that people side, focusing on, the change in the way that people work. So, what did you do, or how did you go about, making organizational change a part, of the technology project? So, that it wasn't just seen as it's a tech project and it's not about you as members of staff.
We already involved, when we were doing the supplier selection, we already involved heads of some of the activities in that supplier selection process, so they could see how some of the modern systems functioned and the sorts of things that we would be able to do in the future. So I think people already had a kind of a vision of what it would mean for them. And that would mean, a change or opportunities to work differently on a modern system. We also made sure that people were involved from the beginning in terms of the scoping exercise, writing the scripts for testing and the detailed testing. So I think being very involved in that process right from the start meant that they kind of had, from an early stage, they had that kind of goal in view, and the fact that it was a process of change for the whole organization that they were part of. We did try and set very clear aims and goals for the project, and kept reminding people of those, when things were getting tough and a bit bogged down, it said, keep the end in sight. We know what we're aiming for. Things will be much easier once the project is in place. And I think, again, the clear directive from the top in terms of the expectations and how important it was for us as an organization, for us to kind of carry on and be successful, for this project to be successful, and for us to change. Obviously, the change didn't all happen straight away. There was a step change when we moved from the old system to the new, but it's a continuous process of change. We've got the systems in place now, and we're evolving new ways of working now that we've got the actual tools to do that. So I think it's not going from A to B straight away, but you have a step change, and then really that allows you to take off and develop further. But I think it was the whole project, the whole intention of it, in terms of moving us forward as an organization. I think we managed to get people on board and see that vision, and make sure that they knew, they were playing a part in that whole. And it was actually, as teamwork for an organization, it was fantastic, because everybody really did enthusiastically, pull their weight, get engaged. And it was hard. It was very hard at times. People are very much out of their comfort zone. But I think the fact that we did it, everybody pretty much was involved. Even we had the chief executive and the finance director doing testing as well at one point at UAT. So it was a kind of, we're all doing this, which worked really well.
Yeah, no, perfect. We have had a question around testing, which I'll come to in a minute. And I'm trying to remember now, and you'll have to forgive me because my memory's terrible. You guys, you put together a project name, didn't you? You named the project.
We had so when we had our first meeting about the project to tell everybody, what was going on, who was involved. It was suggested that it was a good idea to give the project a name, so we could, just not just say the digital transformation project. So we called it Project Optimus. Yeah, one of our team came up with that, and that's stuck basically. I mean, we still use it to refer to the CRM system, because that was the first thing that was in place. So yes, Optimus was what kept us going. And the other thing that we were doing this project essentially during lockdown. We delivered the CRM part of it, the basic, the MVP, in January 2020. And then when we were going into the sort of planning for the website and the phase where we brought in the other activities into the CRM, we essentially went into lockdown. So that's the other thing that I'd kind of forgotten, which was quite an interesting time. It did mean that people, I think, were more available because people weren't traveling to meetings. People were probably more focused because they were home working. So I think to some extent that kind of worked in our favor. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting point, because I know one of the questions we often get asked is, delivering projects in lockdown, and people are thinking, that obviously concerns around it, but actually, as you say, it in some ways it can be a benefit from that focus point of view, from the kind of you get back from people not traveling between meetings and traveling in and out of the office, and that you can deliver successful implementations, successful projects, working in a remote way. So I think it's kind of reassuring for people to hear that as well. You have kind of touched on this already, but how did you arrange the project team to include considerations for what the changes were going to mean for as an organization, because there was a lot of change happening, a new CRM, a new website, all the different integrations and everything around that. But was there anything you did thinking about the project team about what those changes were going to mean for the future?
I think that sort of came along with the with the engagement of people in the project. I think we tried to have a very clear view of where we were heading. I think having a project manager who had experience of similar projects in other organizations, kind of helped us on that path to kind of see where we were heading for and how to get there. We had one of our most successful project teams was what we called the Web Task Force, who were assigned to reviewing our existing website and planning the new one. So we had representatives of web content, communication, and design. And I think that was very interesting, because all of those skill sets came together to go from something that, we had a very big website, which we decided to condense to a much smaller number of pages with a new design, and obviously new functionality. And that was a change in the way that the team was involved in the website, because previously it had been very much kind of, again, the domain of the kind of digital team, but engaging people and making them aware that they were going to be involved in the building, they were going to be involved in the ultimate management. That side of things worked really well. And going back to what you said about the people side of things in your interaction, I did talk to quite a lot of other organizations before setting out on the project, as I said earlier. And the message that came through from them was loud and clear. It's getting the right people involved that is really essential to the success of the project. And I think getting those people to understand what it means for their jobs, how they work, and the ultimate outcome, that's really important. And we did have regular communications with the team. We made sure people were involved in meetings. We had kind of, when we had our weekly updates, there was always a kind of Optimus update, so people were kept on board. Always looking to the future and talking about what was going on and what the next steps were. So I think all of those things work together, really.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, again, your point around the website and the website pages, because I do remember at the time, the conversations going on about the amount, and because, as you say, you had a very large website with a large number of pages, and having those conversations early on about what do we want the new website to be, how much content do we need, and what we want to bring over, and things like that, and not being afraid to have those conversations, because I think it makes a big difference. It's not always just sort of taking the attitude, well, because we've got something now, we take everything, because that's not necessarily always the right way to do. And sometimes they're hard conversations to have. So I remember at the time, and I think it was really good, the way, as you say, with the website group and how that was approached. And I think that did work really, really well. So before we move on to some of the other questions that have come in, what hints or tips would you give to any other organizations who are thinking about embarking on this type of project? Is there any sort of, I suppose, lessons learned or considerations, or you think that if you were doing this again or starting out, that you'd like somebody to tell you?
I mean, we've covered some of those already. The importance of people, both from the top down and bottom up. I think that is really key, getting people on board and really making it something that's a kind of whole organization project or buy-in, and not just a small team. Because I think if it's going to succeed as a new system that works for everybody, then everyone has to have some, invest in it in some way, to make that meaningful. I do recommend having a project manager assigned to something like this, because that person can actually make sure you've got that project plan. People know what they're expected to do and when, can kind of liaise between the digital partner and your internal team. And also it means that they kind of deal with the business of organizing the project, and leave the team with the expertise in the actual subject, the technical side, to get on with that and get on with testing or get on with planning. And I know certainly in our case, without project manager, it would have been, I think, impossible to deliver it in the time that we did. I've had a number of previous projects with website delivery that have really not delivered on time and on budget, because we were trying to manage it internally and there just wasn't enough resource. I think that support for the people who you want to get involved, who need to be involved, is also vital, because as you mentioned earlier, trying to make sure that the day job is done while you focus on the project, that's really key as well. It doesn't go away, things don't go on hold. But we did make our organization aware, and we told people they could put out of offices on to say, I'm involved in the Optimus project, I'll get back to you next week or something, so to make it kind of obvious that that's what we're doing. And I think people are sort of aware enough about IT projects and that kind of thing to know that there can be times when you just have to get your head down and get involved, and can't immediately respond to queries. There will always be problems with projects. I mean, they're complex. They're things do go wrong, but I think it's also really important to have a sort of clear structure in place for dealing with issues and making decisions, because that's really what you need. If you've got sort of a project manager who's the first port of call and then knows who to go to with a particular problem, and you've got a senior team who's involved and aware of what's going on and can make a decision, an informed decision, then that really helps. There's nothing worse than kind of floundering around and not quite knowing what you need to do or what the options are. And that what you were saying earlier as well is kind of constant and honest communication with your supplier. I think when when things are going wrong, then you need to make sure that you have those conversations if they're and difficult conversations, as well. But it's really important. And then in terms of the actual, during the process, I think it's really important to keep those longer term goals in mind, but really keep focused on priorities, because it's very easy to get distracted by sort of nice to haves, or once people start getting involved in the testing or looking at their part of the system, is to get kind of a bit to get into too much detail and think about things that perhaps aren't really the basics. You really want to get the basics in place that allow you to do your job. And then the nice to haves can come at a later stage. And I think that was something that we learned towards the end of the project. We were sort of running out of time in UAT. It was a very short space of time for us to do that, to get the project delivered, and that focus on priorities was really important. And I know people were getting really stressed because they had lots to do. And once you say, okay, what are your priorities? Focus on these, and we'll just park the rest. I think that helps to relieve the stress a bit. And I think internally, in terms of people, it's really important to have somebody who has a sort of a good overview of the organizational needs and a sort of technical knowledge of systems, who can make sure that priorities are sensible and relevant, and kind of act as the translator, because sometimes you need to have someone who can talk to the project supplier, understand what it is that the system is going to be doing, and then explain it in more familiar terms to the people within your organization, because sometimes it's hard to to identify what it is that is going to be delivered and how that actually will influence how you can work. So the kind of internal person managing that, I think, is really key as well.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with all of that, Nuna. I mean, I think they're all, great insights and great things for people to think about. So I was just going to move on quickly to some of the questions that we've had in. And you've touched on testing, and I think it's an interesting one. So the question is, did you have any issues around testing, as this has been a big challenge for us? And I know you've kind of mentioned it, but yeah, I don't know if there's anything else you wanted to say around testing and challenges around testing.
Yes, well, we had a number of different teams who were involved in the detailed testing. It was usually kind of the manager, the subject expert in an area, and we did write testing scripts for UAT. And I think a lot of people had problems kind of getting their heads around what that would mean, what that actually is, and then how to use it, because not having done it before, I think it's kind of getting your head around the concept is quite hard. So I think having, we had some helpful examples for people, and our project manager helped people to actually compose those scripts and then, get ready for testing. And I think once we'd done that, it was a lot easier once you understand what you're actually trying to do. But it was very intense, because we had a lot of testing to do, and I think you just can't get away from it. It's really important to keep a log of that as a record of your tests, because we found that there was something that went wrong kind of further down the line, and we were able to refer back to the scripts and say, actually, when we tested this, it was working. So it's, it's not, we're not asking for something to be changed. It's something that was functioning and is now not functioning. So that as a record of what you've tested and what was working, what wasn't. I mean, I'm still referring back to some scripts now to do with the website testing, because we're finding bugs on the website. And because we've got the UAT scripts, we can go back and say, well, actually that was working, we signed it off. And now for some reason it's not. So it is a bit of a painful process, but I think it's definitely worthwhile and useful even further down the line if you can do that in the sort of structured way.
I absolutely love that, Nuna. I think that, that's such a great idea, is that keeping that log of it and referring back to it. So you can kind of, you have proof to say, no, it worked before, and we signed it off. So we're expecting it to work and we're not going to pay extra to fix this because it worked before. I think that's absolutely brilliant. Two questions that have come in, but they are interlinked. So I'll just read them both out first. So the first one was around, how did you manage resistance to delivering against a tight time frame? And then the second question, which I think ties in as well, is did you face any issues with board members or management wanting to bring forward elements of the project to get it done quicker? Because there's somebody on the session today is finding that's a problem on their project. So sort of, timeline and people trying to bring elements, forward to just try and get things done quicker.
We didn't have that issue. I mean, we already had a very tight delivery schedule because our CRM system was being closed down, and we had to deliver that first part of the project within, I think it was within 5 months. We had our project plan. We originally thought we would deliver different modules over a series of different mini projects, but in the end, with talking with the supplier, we decided that it would be better to do that all at once, which did make things a lot more stressful. But I think having the project manager and having the plan in place, that there was no room for maneuver, and things had to be done in a specific order, because the timeline was so tight. Was basically, this is how it has to be. We did have some discussion towards the end, because we did have to make some decisions about what would be delivered for go live, and certain projects were put to one side and said, well, we don't have to have that, we can deliver that post go live. So I think that's a discussion that's possible of certain things you might find that can be delayed. But I think that's hard when you've got people pushing for a specific thing. You've got to look at the project as a whole and get it to work as a whole. I think it's hard to change that without really, it can mess things up. Our trustees were very doubtful at the beginning and said, we've never seen an IT project delivered to time and to budget in this organization. And we were absolutely determined as a result that we would deliver it to time and to budget. And we did succeed, which is great. So I think in some ways having that kind of spurred us on. As I said earlier, it is a matter of towards the delivery is prioritization. And I think if you need to deliver something as a priority, then it might mean that something else has to be delayed. I think there's only so much space you've got to maneuver with. I think having a relatively tight deadline was, in a way, a good thing for the project as a whole, because it is an intense period. You've got to really, we were kind of running as fast as we could to get it delivered and putting an awful lot of effort in. And you can't sustain that over a very long period of time. I think we had about 3 or 4 months from the summer of 2020 until November, when we had a really intense period, and you know, that was fine. You can maintain that momentum and people can live through that. But if you're doing it for any longer, then that becomes really hard, and I think people just run out of energy, and it becomes counterproductive. So that's also a consideration. I think, you know, we could have said, well, delay the project, you know, so we can get more done, delay it for another 2 months, but I don't think people would have survived that in a good state. And you know, other things, we had put day jobs aside in order to deliver the project. So again, you know, you've got to keep that under consideration as well.
Perfect.
Yeah.
I'm just conscious of time, and just one quick question, but I don't not necessarily be able to answer all of it now. But the question was around how did you go about, or I suppose the question is, or did you go about reviewing any processes that were inefficient, and therefore not ideal to bring over to the new system? So I suppose the question is, did you look at any business process reviews in advance, or is that something that you did later, or something that you're looking at now?
I think we knew that there were some processes that weren't efficient to start off with. So we did do that while we were doing the spec for the CRM. Our aim in terms of doing the, you know, the integration of systems, we knew that there were those manual processes that were downloading, uploading data. That for sure was an area we'd identified previously. But we're still doing that now. Now we've got the systems in place, we're more familiar with the actual functionality. We are looking for areas where efficiencies can be made. So I think you probably have some things in mind. I think in talking to people in individual departments and activities, you can come up with those that are the kind of the low-hanging fruit, as it were. But once the system is in place, then there will definitely be opportunities for more.
Perfect. Thank you, Nuna. And as always, we're running out of time. So really just what I want to say is thank you so much, Nuna, for joining us today. And any questions we haven't covered, we can send out information on them afterwards. But and I suppose the other thing I wanted to say is that when Nuna says about they brought the project in on time and on budget, that they absolutely did, and that it is such an achievement. I think sometimes people underestimate what an achievement that is, because the number of projects that we see and the projects that we hear about and work on, it is a huge achievement to do that. And having brought all staff and everybody on board with the project, and as you said, Nuna, sort of having a board of trustees who are a bit skeptical from the start is definitely a good driver. So I just want to say thank you so much for joining us this morning. That's been absolutely brilliant. And thank you all of you for joining us this morning, and then hopefully we'll see you again on another session soon.